Welcome, everyone. Seeing our numbers trickling in. Thank you all for being here with us today.
Welcome. You got a good crew today.
Yeah, let's hear where everybody's calling in from.
And how many people have all that crazy snow?
Oh, yeah.
I do.
A lot of sisters. Matt does.
Yeah.
Always.
Oh, San Diego. They always win on weather.
Got some
That is one of my plays.
2 inches of snow in Wilmington, Mass. That's 2 feet. That's just 2 feet of snow in Wilmington.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, Bronson, hello, fellow Syracusean.
Seattle sun is out. Lucky Bethany.
Nice in the Northwest today. Okay, I'm going to give it like 10 more seconds. I'm watching these numbers go up and I'm getting excited. Okay. Welcome, everyone. If I didn't already say that to you up top, we're so excited to have so many of you here with us today. And before we dive in, a quick call out. Nearly 100 of you submitted questions before we registered, which is crazy. Here's a couple of them up on the screen today, and they really do tell the story of why we are here today. So if you relate to any of these questions, or if you're asking the same things, you are in the right place. And feel free to drop any other questions in the chat at any time. We want this to be conversational. We'll try to answer them as we are going through the content today. And I think I'm going to turn it over and have everybody introduce themselves. Matt, can I start with you?
Yeah. No. Welcome everybody. I'm Matt Gardner, co-founder and CEO of Hiline. If you're not familiar with Hiline, all we do is outsource financial operations, and we love the nonprofit space. So we love work with nonprofits, and a lot of the work we do with them every single day relates to so much of the content we're going to cover today. So thank you for joining, and I hope you enjoy the presentation.
Yeah. Hey, everyone. My name is Karen Houghton, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of Infinite Giving. We are based in Atlanta, Georgia, but serve over 400 nonprofits all over the U.S. And we are a financial technology platform and a registered investment advisor. So we are on the financial side, and we are a fiduciary partner for small to mid-sized nonprofits. And we are helping you receive donations, manage those donations, and grow those donations with the goal of having financial sustainability. We're glad to be here.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. Kevin Allen. I'm the CEO of Changing Our World, and we work with nonprofits of sort of all shapes and sizes and every stage of development, thinking through how to build higher and more sustainable revenue programs. We also work with companies and thinking through how to connect their community impact to their business strategies for sustainability and impact. Thanks for having us.
Awesome. We're so thankful to have everyone here today. I'm Katie Burns, Chief of Staff at Hiline, and I'll be moderating today's panel. So I'm going to have Matt paint the picture for us. What does the cash flow crisis actually look like for nonprofits right now?
Yeah. So just first of all, Kevin, welcome. Thanks for joining today. And Karen, this is our second webinar together. So thank you for coming back. The first one was a lot of fun.
Really good to be here.
And today should be even better.
Yeah.
So the state of the cash flow crisis for nonprofits. I mean, I think most nonprofits out there are up against a number of different factors. A lot of uncertainty related to state and federal funding right now that is forcing folks to kind of rethink where the dollar's coming from. And I think the default thinking in the other main funding source tends to be from grants. And with uncertainty around federal and state funding, reliance on grants, that can oftentimes translate into being rich on paper, but really broke in reality, because a lot of the grants tend to be reimbursable. So you could have $500,000 in committed grants, but you really could ultimately end up with $0 in the bank account and a payroll run coming up on Friday. And that's a tough place to be. I think nearly every single nonprofit, I mean, there are some that are very fortunate to have large endowments, but that's not the norm. So I think what we're realizing is that there is just an absorbent amount of time that nonprofit leaders are spending right now focused on thinking about cash. How do I get sustainable? What does that mean for me? And we surveyed hundreds of nonprofit leaders, and the wild feedback we got was that 23 of them are spending at least 11 hours a week on cash flow issues. And that could be anything from thinking about it, troubleshooting, trying to figure out like how are we going to get done, how are we going to make payroll. That's a quarter of your work week. I mean, that is insane. I mean, that's 11 plus hours that you're not able to focus on the mission and driving towards the mission of the organization. So today is all about funding diversification and how to think strategically about how do we kind of get out of this into a place of more sustainability. So
Okay.
we could just do a quick, where does everybody think they fall in this poll in terms of how many hours are you typically spending per week thinking about cash flow? Hopefully 0. But if everybody's willing to be honest and transparent, I'd love to see what everybody's thinking out there. 0.
That's the goal. The goal is 0, right?
0.
Maybe 2 or less hours would be ideal. Okay, Karen, you work with nonprofits managing this exact problem every day. Why does grant timing create such operational chaos?
I think everyone probably tuning in is like, man, I wish the grant funders knew what it was like to sit in our seats, right? And that's also so often the bane of our existence of like trying to connect with the grant funding works and the way we're operating our nonprofits and our organizations. It's usually the most painful when you are a nonprofit that's operating in a scarcity mindset. Right? Because then you're like, hey, money in and money out, and we have no reserve fund. And that's where that 23%, those people are sitting on 0 reserves. And it comes like from this place sometimes where I think, all nonprofits start in a scarcity mindset, right? But those who are there, it's exhausting, right? It's like we're spending so much time worried about cash flow. And it's leading to burnout. And the other side of that is sometimes we're like, well, donors expect that. Or, this scarcity mindset is noble. We're doing a great work. We're not allowed to, we're not supposed to have any buffer. And that is really far from truth, right? And so I think often as nonprofit leaders, we have to give ourselves permission to say, you know what? It's not necessarily a noble thing to sit in this scarcity mindset. And so at Infinite Giving, we often talk about a framework of moving from scarcity to strategy. And then ideally that strategy is leading to sustainability. Because what a beautiful thing to be a financially sustainable organization, right? And it's not about having excess, but about having enough that if there is that delay in funding, okay, we can keep doing our work, we can pay our people, and we can keep the lights on until it hits. Or having a strategy of like, hey, we know the grant's coming, but we know it's going to be a while. What are we going to do in the meantime? And reserves can often play that role. And so as a good rule of thumb, if you're like, I don't even know where to start, that sounds lovely, Karen, but what does that actually mean? It's giving yourself the permission and then actively and intentionally pursuing building a healthy reserve fund. Well, how much is that? Lots of right paths here, but generally speaking, 6 to 12 months of operational reserves on hand in a low risk, highly liquid opportunity that's not your checking account, right? That's put aside as like, hey, this is our 6-month emergency reserve. So if the grant doesn't come through, or if, we have to spend it all out and then back in, and we need to kind of bridge that gap, that's what it's there for. So instead of us staying up at night, we're saying, no, we planned for this. We know where to go. We can pull that money. And then guess what? We can put that money back in. And we are starting to financially plan for that. And that strategy is what's going to help get us to that sustainability. And I've got a couple stats, because then sometimes people are like, are you sure we're allowed to do that? Right. And the answer is yes. And so here, when we're then talking about donors, we all have that donor that wants 100% of their gift to go to programs. Not reasonable, but the majority of donors don't think that way. I know the U.S. Trust study of high net worth philanthropy said that 69% of major donors are more likely to give to nonprofits that demonstrate strong leadership and clear financial strategy. And then Dr. Russell James, he's a great resource. He's done at Texas Tech. He did a lot of studies, and he found that perceived financial strength actually significantly increases donor trust and generosity, particularly among high capacity donors. And ultimately, the fundraising effectiveness last one project found that donor retention is consistently higher among organizations that show stability, transparency, and a long-term plan. So if you take these data points, and then I would just ask yourself, like, is it noble to live in a scarcity mindset? And I think everybody on this call would kind of challenge that and say, hey, not only is it exhausting, that's not good for the organization. It's not good for the people you serve. So to bridge that gap, intentionally building a healthy reserve fund is just wise stewardship of a nonprofit.
Yeah, you can't as well. So you can't be at your best if you're under financial stress. I mean, there's no worse stress on the planet, personally or in business, than financial stress.
And when you're a nonprofit, that's all the pressure of the work you're doing. Like at what point, if we launch a program and we're doing all this really important work and then we can't sustain it and we have to stop the work, are you doing more harm than good at that point? Right. So everything that we on the financial side, and like on this call, is it's like, how do we have continuity for your mission? How do we have peace of mind for you? And moving out of that scarcity mindset and into more of a strategy and a sustainability mindset is best for all the key stakeholders, including the people you serve.
Matt, how can a 13-week cash flow help with some of that financial stress, maybe taking it off the board?
I would say forward-looking planning in general is important, right? Like sometimes when it feels hard, it can feel hard to look, right? Like I kind of going to play ostrich and put my head in the sand and we're going to figure it out. Well, it's not a good strategy. It can backfire. You can get surprised, right? So I think about like planning in two buckets. There's long-term planning, which is like planning out 12 months in advance. Think about it like a budget. You got to know what it's going to cost to run your organization. You got to have a good pulse on where you're going to get, where's the funding coming from for me to do that. That's a bit of a more of a long-term look. But if you don't have the healthy reserve that Karen was talking about, the short-term planning tool that we love, that I think is critical for every organization to have, is a 13-week cash flow tool, which is like tried and tested CFO tool. It's basically looking 1 quarter out, and it's easy to make the numbers work when you're doing it month over month and you're looking out 12 months. But there are nuances to payroll and when payroll falls, and when am I going to receive the cash from the grant that I had to voucher for? And that's a way, just keeping that refreshed every week. And it's a decision tool, and it's to help keep you informed and give yourself the time and space every week to sit down. I'm going to spend 1 hour on this. I'm going to just understand what it's telling me. And that is really it's like a decision meeting or a decision encounter with yourself, where you're going to ground yourself in reality, and you're going to work through, what do I need to do to kind of get through these tough periods of compression? And typically, if you're looking out 3 months, you're giving yourself enough time to adjust. Yeah, you should have a sense when you build a 12-month plan or longer. I kind of feel these are the moments and the periods where I really need to keep my ear to the ground and pay attention. But doing that granular look every week, that's going to help you stay on top of it and avoid like a real cash crunch that's going to create so much stress and chaos and distract from the good work you're doing every day.
And if you can't do the 13-week cash flow plan or you don't have reserves, then I think it's like you have a responsibility to kind of stop and be like, all right, why are we doing this? Do we have the means to do that? And it takes often, I think, a sacrifice of short term for the long-term gain of the organization, like where it's like, yes, there's always like the tyranny of the urgent in nonprofits is always there because there's always important work that has to be done. But right, sometimes it's, hey, we have to pause, or we're not going to launch this new program, or we're going to decrease over here in order for us to build up and get to a financially sustainable place. And then we're going to continue to grow. So it's not a growth at all costs, because then you're doing more harm than good.
Yep. Yeah, it can't be that work to get to sustainability and having reserves. Like that is like, it's going to take work and it's going to take discipline. And it can't be the thing that sits on the side of your desk that you're like, I'm going to do that, because that would just make our operations run so much more smoothly. It's kind of just adding that on top, like understanding that that's going to set the organization up for the long term, And I have to put that work in now and put down some of the other things that I feel like I need to be doing too, but like are not going to have the same strategic impact on the organization.
Absolutely. What do you think, Kevin? You're quiet over there.
I was thinking of Karen's earlier point, and your major donors are going to expect this. And if you want to accept a significant investment from a donor, they need to be certain that their significant investment is protected, right? And so this sort of reinforces that whole idea.
Yeah.
Oh, man, and we haven't even gotten into major donors, but that is
No.
so much of then when you look at, okay, everybody would love a big check, right? Like no one's mad about that. Like, yes, please. We all want more major donors, right? But then those bigger amounts, like those donors are looking for different things. And so when we don't have the ability to easily receive stock gifts, or we don't have a brokerage account, or you don't have a reserve fund, those large gifts want to go to more financially sustainable organizations, and they're often more business savvy. And so they're looking at those orgs and saying, ooh, I don't know that they can take this big gift. And then they give it elsewhere. And then what that does is it makes the big organizations stay big and the small organizations stay small. And then we're caught in this cycle where sometimes the smaller organizations are doing the most important, impactful work in our communities, yet they feel like they can't ever get ahead. And so, Katie, I know I'm jumping ahead, but I know you were going to ask me about like stock giving and things like that. And it's this opportunity where 90% of nonprofits don't have broker. Oh, look, she went ready to go. See, I knew, like, amazing. But this is 90% of nonprofits don't have brokerage accounts. And maybe for a lot of you guys, you're like, well, yeah, no, we're in this scarcity mindset. If I have to cancel, payroll, I'm not thinking about this. But to Kevin's point earlier, it's like you have to have infrastructure. And how do we get infrastructure? Well, something like a brokerage account, allows you to receive stock gifts. Okay, well, why is that important? The average online cash gift is about $128. That's the national average online. The average stock gift is about $8,000. So right there, right? That's the equivalent of what? 62 online cash givers or one stock donation. And so, which do you want to serve? Kind of a trick question. You want to serve all your donors. You want to accept all the gifts. But if you're opting out by saying, "Oh, we don't do the infrastructure. No one wants stock gifts," then you're taking those major donors and you're saying, "Nope, we don't have the ability to give you those tax efficiencies. We don't have the infrastructure to process that gift. Go give it elsewhere." And then they'll just give you a smaller cash gift, and you get stuck in that cycle. And brokerage accounts also allow you to steward what you have well, right? As you start to get reserves, or for those folks watching who are like, oh no, yeah, we've got our 6-month reserve or our 3-month reserve or 12 months or wherever you feel is healthy for you. Then often the question is, well, where is it? And then it's often sitting in a checking account, a savings account, a CD where you have no liquidity. But having a brokerage account then opens up the opportunity to get better yields, to be in a more fiduciary covered, situation and relationship. Like we have a government-backed fixed income portfolio, great for cash reserves, low risk, high liquidity. Net fees in 2025, we were at 5.99%. Right. And so you start to look at all of these things and be like, oh, this sounds overwhelming. But if you have the infrastructure and you have a brokerage account, then all of a sudden you're starting to meet donors where they are. You sound better. And ultimately, all of this is that scarcity strategy, right? The infrastructure that gives you the ability to be more strategic about your finances ultimately helps major givers and more generous givers trust you more with those bigger gifts.
Like in practical terms, how do you just knock down the barriers to giving? There's enough barriers, enough reasons that somebody shouldn't make a gift. You gotta sort of open up those platforms so that they can.
Yeah.
And Karen, so there's a couple of things you said. So you covered this in our last webinar, but like this might be obvious, but it might not be obvious. Like this discrepancy between cash gifts and stock gifts. I mean, typically, like someone with more worth that's willing to give is going to keep their liquidity in stocks, and they're not going to want to cash their stocks in to give you cash. They're going to want to do the most tax efficient thing, which is gift a stock. So it just opens your
Yeah.
world up to a much broader base of donors who are more likely to give more.
And think about where the wealth sits, right? 90% of wealth in the US is not held in cash. So when
Yep.
you're only asking for cash, that's actually the smallest bucket of funding, right? But
Yep.
if you can move into assets or securities, then you're asking from a bigger bucket of wealth, which is where the bigger gifts come from.
Yeah, I think about it. It's like we talk about infrastructure a lot, right? Like being able, like to say I want to diversify my funding sources is one thing, but like you have to have the infrastructure to make it easy for people to do business with you. Like that is the key. You have to modernize. You have to be able to take gifts and donations and meet people where they're at. And I think that is super, super important. And I think for periods of time, it can feel easy. Like you can rely on the same funding over and over again. That's not where we're at anymore. I think it is like the moment is right now to start thinking about how do I modernize my organization to be able to keep pace and be perceived to be punching above my weight class for my size, because you
Right.
want to stand out.
You want to be perceived as bigger than you are to earn that trust. And it's, and brokerage accounts can be really difficult to open. A lot of banks won't even do it for nonprofits. But it's worth mentioning that we at Infinite Giving, we have the only online brokerage account opening that exists for nonprofits in the US. 30 minutes of your time, 3 business days on our end, and there's no minimums. It's just a small monthly fee. So even things like, the administrative burden usually is like a 6 to 12 week snail mail, wet ink process, but we are trying to remove those barriers just to make it more accessible as well.
Thank you,
Love it.
Karen. I see there's a question in the chat about that. So I think you're speaking to the right audience here about the brokerage accounts.
Good.
Okay. How about we talk a little bit about diversified revenue strategies, Kevin? I know this is really where you come in. We're going to run a quick poll here for the group. How would you describe your organization's current funding mix? And Kevin, I'll let you kind of talk about these different groups. And
Yeah, it's interesting. When I think about sort of the building on this idea of infrastructure, when we think about, I think it's important to first, there's no like perfect diversification ratio, right? Your stage of development, the type of work you do, where you do it, what the culture of your institution is, the culture of the board. Like those are all going to be important factors in sort of figuring out what's right for you. But I think the idea is if you're over indexed in one area and under penetrating another, like what is your baseline and where are you going to start moving so that you're healthier? A lot of organizations are grant dependent, and grants are structured and they're culturally familiar, they're predictable, sort of. Boards understand them, staff organize around them. There's a process and a defined outcome, and many organizations build their whole organizations around that. The problem is it doesn't necessarily pay for the full cost of the work. It could be episodic. So the choice becomes: do you just get better at what you do, finding opportunities, writing grants, connecting with decision makers, or do you try to step into another source? And that can be scary, right? What do you we're doing something we don't know about. We're doing something that we're not sure how much it costs. We're doing something maybe we weren't built for, and we still got to kind of step that way, right? If you don't have individual gifts, you don't have individual donors, you're missing out on the largest piece of the philanthropic pie. So how do you start organizing around that, aligning up your systems around that? It's not just adding a donate now button. It's about really building that infrastructure, the things that the team on the call are talking about, but also, your comfort with storytelling, your ability to sort of work with your board to expand how they can move people into the organizations. You got to be pushing on a number of factors as you start thinking about.
I'd say one thing missing here too is interest from the funds that you have. So when we talk about diversifying our revenue streams, it's, we hold a lot of grants temporarily, and a lot of the organizations that we'll work with, maybe they're doing a capital campaign and they're like, hey, this is a 2-year campaign or a 3 or 5-year campaign. Well, when the money is coming in, where does it go? Where is it sitting? When we process a grant, which we do receive grants via securities on behalf of our clients a good bit, where is it sitting? And we'll often work through and say, all right, if here's a conservative holding, if you can make 5% over this year on this money before it spends down, like that's a nice major donor gift right there, right? Depending on how you define major donors. But I think often we don't think that way, right? Because we're thinking money in, money out. We're not always thinking about what do we do with the money while we have it before we spend it down. And so it can be a really creative solution to just add another layer of diversification as well as just stewarding it well and getting it outside of the bank and into something that's conservative but higher growth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I also think, even if you are grant dependent, it's like not every grant is the right grant for you either, right? Like we see a lot of organizations that get the same grants every year. A lot of the grants don't allow for a lot of like administrative carve out time, like cost to administer the program, and the requirements to requisition for the funds can be very, very tedious. So I think, time is the greatest asset that we have. So you just want to be also really deliberate about like, even if we are highly grant dependent, just make sure you've got like the right grant partners and they're not too small and they're not too administratively burdensome. And don't be afraid to ask for a little bit more to be able to run the program and all the administrative aspects of delivering on the grant and reporting back to them.
Oh, it's such a good reminder because there's such a power differential sometimes where it feels like, oh, we can't negotiate. We can't, like, we just need all of the money. Yes. But it's a good reminder that it doesn't hurt to ask and to figure out kind of a better pathway forward.
I've seen, go ahead, Kevin.
I think it's a really interesting point. I mean, I think we have, you got to look at diversification across sources, but you got to look at diversification within sources, right? If I've got a healthy fundraising program, 80% of my budget, and it's concentrated in 2 donors, I don't have a healthy program. And so how you like look at the numbers under the numbers to make sure that it's sort of evening out and you're not too leaning too much toward a risky.
Concentration risk.
Yeah.
Just like I think like if you got 1 or 2 major customers and if you lost one tomorrow, what would happen? Concentration risk is important to understand and think about. And on the grant side, like I've, way back when we first started the company, I would do a lot of the work myself, nonprofits, and I would do some of the grant vouchering. Sometimes I'd find $10,000 grants that I swear I could have taken $10,000 of my time just to get the money.
Yeah.
Because of how tedious it was.
Yeah.
Okay, Kevin, let's talk a little bit about major gift cultivation. So what does that actually look like? How would you move someone from a one-time $500 gift to a committed $10K supporter?
Right. Relationships are at the root of philanthropy, not wealth. And so how do you develop relationships in your personal life? Right. We're bringing that to this work. I think the first thing to think about is the golden donation, right? One-time gift, $500, $50, $25 is amazing. It's great. It's that point in the door. We're seeing sort of fewer and fewer households that are participating in organized, they're giving charitably annually. So getting that first gift is critical because you have to have it to get the second gift, but it's that second gift that makes a donor. And so what are you doing when somebody comes through the door, somebody invests in you, to help them know that you're really celebrating their investment in your organization or discovery of your organization? And then you've got a process, you've got a track that you're putting on. You've sort of got these moves that you're helping them progress down this relationship. You're learning about them, they're learning about you, and there's an increasing back and forth. And you start to have conversations about the vision of the organization, where you're going. You start to understand what the donor's interests are, and maybe you want to direct them to a certain area. So I think it's the more you can get. I have a client, I love this. They talk about one-way relationships versus two-way relationships. And if you can sort of move that ratio to two-way relationships so that I know you and you know me, you're going to start moving those donors upwards.
I had somebody say the other day that I loved, and they were like, they're not your donor, right? I mean, they are, right? But they're like, you don't own that in that way. You are lucky enough that you are their organization that they're choosing. And it was a nuance of a shift, but it's like, hey, that is that donor's treasures. It is their finances. And if you are lucky enough to be on that recipient side, right, then that's that relationship. And so versus, we have to do this. I love the two-way relationship and just reminding that, hey, that generous giver has the opportunity to come alongside you in different ways. And as you're having those conversations, it's like they want you to be sustainable. They want you to have some type of infrastructure. They want to have confidence that you're going to be there 3 years, 5 years, 10 years plus down the road. And what can we do in that relationship to meet them where they are? And often some of that's the education, as I mentioned before, like the tax efficiency, like these are business people often, right? And they're savvy and they want the tax efficiencies. That's not why they give, but that is helpful to them and in the pathways that you give them opportunities.
And they don't want to be alone, right? We're all looking for community, and right now we all kind of need community. And I think the more you can demonstrate that they are sort of entering this family, right? I'm not saying that you got to get all your donors together in the same room, but talking about how different donors are engaging with the organization, sharing donor stories in the same way that you talk about the mission of your work, helps them understand the vital role that they play and helps them understand that they're not alone. Or maybe that $500 donor says, oh, I see at the $10,000 level, these kind of things are possible. And I see that there's 10 people there that are doing that. I want to move that way. You can help them go.
A donor is more like an investor than not, right? Like they're investing into your business, into your organization. There's something about what you're doing that they believe in, and they want to feel connected to it. And I think it's important to remember that, they're a donor, but like they want to hear how it's going. They want to hear how it's growing. They want to hear what you're working on. And they want to have a conversation about it because there's something about what you said to them that caught their attention and that they believe in. And they generally want to make an impact in that area.
Yeah. And planned giving comes a lot from that too, like endowment giving, planned giving. I don't know, we may not want to go all the way down that path today, but I think there's a lot of data that says, hey, a lot of these major givers and major donors, they may be the people who just gave monthly for years and years and years, but then they left it in the will or they left a larger sum. And so introducing and not being scared to engage in those conversations of like, yeah, could we do an endowment? Is there different ways of sustainability or giving where, end of life giving and things like that, where you can invite those bigger gifts into? And I think when we're in that scarcity mindset, we often just disregard that and say, oh, we can't even think about that. We're trying to keep the lights on. But that's a part of that bigger framework and strategy where we want those bigger gifts to go to smaller orgs so that more, folks can be sustainable. Kevin, like where do you fall on the plans giving and endowments for orgs, like just trying to move for sustainability?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I think about my mom. I mean, my mom's a teacher and her big gift will be in her estate, right? She's supported many, many organizations over the years, and she's very committed to those organizations. And she will make her major gift, when she's gone. And first of all, she's excited about that. What an opportunity for her. What an opportunity. What a way, a connection for that organization to build a relationship with her over time. And so it's not always the top of the pyramid that gives you a top of the pyramid gift at the end. And so I think looking at how you're thinking about your long-term strategies, you cultivate donors, you've always got to do that, but sometimes that long-term strategy should extend beyond their lifetime. And so that's part of it. Like, how do they believe that an organization is sustaining once they're gone? How are they confident that the organization is going to continue to focus on this mission? How they, all those, the infrastructure that makes it work and sort of the storytelling that tells them why they should do this is really important. And then, there are instances where you're purposely building an endowment. You're purposely directing gifts this way. Maybe we're asking for outright gifts now. Maybe we're encouraging people to make a testamentary gift for later. And so sort of understanding where your donors are in that journey. The $500 donor that you asked me about, Katie, I'm not going to ask them the next time I talk to them to consider a planned gift, right? I'm going to sort of, what's my interim goal to get to my big goal? And I'm going to plan my strategy around that.
And if you're doing it authentically in a relationship, it's a long-term game anyway, right? It's the idea of like, hey, we're cultivating this, but you're always keeping all of those opportunities open.
Before we move on, Kevin, I'd love to talk about corporate partnerships and your thoughts on those.
And corporate partnerships are incredibly powerful, and they have the power to, I think about them, that's really aligning sort of market success and community impact, right? Driving community impact. And they can help you with obviously funding, but visibility and maybe access to new donors through their employees. Like there's so many ways to leverage a partnership, but it's also exceedingly limited. Like I think 7% of total US giving is from companies. 8% is through bequests, to what we were just talking about. So dead people are giving more than companies do. So as you think about lining up your strategy, like think about that. I think the over the transom sort of spray and pray outreach is not going to work, and works increasingly less well. I think you've got to really understand, you got to do your homework and sort of understand their strategy and how you fit into their strategy, and sort of align your request around that. You've got to really find those openings to move within institutions, right? There's lots of buckets within companies, and sort of your ability to walk down the hall or use one office to get you to the next office becomes a big part of the strategy. But at the core, you got to have a value proposition that resonates with them and what they're trying to achieve. And so it's less about you and more about what they're trying to achieve.
Well said.
Okay, Matt.
Yeah, I'm up. So I think Karen, Kevin, awesome insights. The strategic plan of getting to diversified funding, super important, but you got to do it, right? We talked a lot about infrastructure, and it highlighted, like we've kind of been talking about, like we're working with over 100 nonprofits. We see the same trends over and over again. Like we're starting to kind of coin some of those common themes as kind of the doom loop. And what the doom loop is a flywheel. And we opened the webinar by talking about the timing crisis, right? When you are not diversified and you're highly dependent on grants and reimbursable grants, you can be rich on paper and broke in reality. And you find yourself in moments where you are tight, you are stressed, you are trying to figure it out, and you're not spending the right amount of time being strategic or delivering on the mission of the organization. When you get into that, that's essentially what that is leadership burnout, right? The executive director, the board, program, everybody is spending an absorbent amount of time thinking about, like, how do we fix this, right? You're working more in crisis mode. You're not focused on mission. It gets exhausting. You can kind of get stuck, and it can actually start to feel normal. Like, this is just what we do. This is how we run the organization. And the third step of that is the compliance trap. So not only are you stressed because you may be cash poor, you're spending in a lot of time burning out, trying to figure out how to navigate through it. But you also have this compliance trap, which I think may take the most time of any of the other steps. And on average, we're hearing like 28 hours per week spent inside organizations on manual grant reporting, finance, accounting, data entry, not strategy. And oftentimes that's done to fulfill the obligations you have to reimburse for the grants. So that time it's needed and it's important, but again, you're not actually spending the right amount of time to get yourself out of this loop. So the last stage, which is the one we're going to double click into a second, is the fundraising penalty. And if you're spending all of your time managing through crisis and burning out and in this compliance trap, you're not spending the right amount of time, and you haven't built the infrastructure to tell a clear financial story. And if you can't tell a clear financial story, and if you can't demonstrate you're a sophisticated organization, and you can't show up to these meetings where you're trying to find diversified funding sources, you're going to find it's going to be very difficult for you to land some of those opportunities. and the doom loop kind of continues. You stay on the same flywheel. You can't get off of it. It can happen for years, and it's very, very challenging for organizations, and it can start to feel quite normal. So just quick chat exercise. Like which one of these 4 stages feels most familiar to everybody out there in the audience? Yeah, nothing coming through. Leadership burnout, big bold letters.
Yeah, number 2. Wow.
Yep.
Lot of numbers.
Real. Yeah.
That's
Man,
incredible.
we need to do some encouraging for all of our leaders.
Our next webinar should be.
And so
Yeah.
let's double click into the fundraising penalty. Okay, so based on all the polling we did, we found the problem is 79% of organizations lack the confidence in financial presentation during due diligence, like when you're actually out trying to solicit funds. Kevin talked about this, like it's a lot of it is marketing and it's brand and it's telling your story. And if you show up and you are demonstrating that you are bigger than you actually are, you're building confidence, and that's going to shine through in the way that you engage with folks that you're soliciting funding from. 30% report have lost funding due to reporting gaps. They don't have the infrastructure set up internally. Oftentimes it can be as simple as bookkeeping isn't being done well, accounting is not being done well, like not good, clean financial reports. They're not presented in a way that is actually going to tell the story. You may not have good, clean data around donors and where is your money coming from, putting stuff together in spreadsheets. Like it just doesn't come across as like this was easy for you to produce. I think people can kind of see through that. If it felt like it was a scramble to pull it all together and put a package together, generally a sophisticated donor is going to be able to pick up on that. And most importantly, you may not be able to answer their questions and engage in a way that's going to help build confidence too. So it's all going to kind of fit together. So the result is you're back on the flywheel, over-reliance on reimbursable based grants, can't diversify, the loop continues. So the fix is infrastructure. And that's what Hiline, prior to Self found, is like a very strong back office financial foundation and operations for nonprofits. Establishing the infrastructure to make sure that all of your back office, bookkeeping, accounting, record keeping, grant vouchering, budgets, cash flow plan, all that stuff is tight. There's a really dialed in process, the best technology. You're producing really nice, usable, ingestible reports. And you have a good partner who's actually helping you start to understand what this is saying about your organization, helping you think about like where we need to get better. How do we benchmark and measure against others that are going to be out there, maybe trying to solicit the same funding. And then Karen, maybe I'll kick it over to you to talk about gift diversification at the structure.
Yeah, it's hey, let's do more than a PayPal link, or let's do more than just credit and debit. And so that's where looking at how do we really maximize the different ways we're meeting major donors where they are. Do they know about the tax efficiencies? And so we can, at Infinite Giving, we can help you do stocks. We get a brokerage account open and ready to go in 3 business days for you. We have a donor advised fund widget. We can handle endowments. We can handle crypto, and even more of an outlier, but it does. Yeah, but it's there, and IRS treats crypto just like they do securities. So an outlier, but it does occur. And a lot of what we do is cash management too. Like how much reserves is enough? How much is too much? How do we think about it? Where should we put it? And again, just walking through. For us, we're quite complementary to where Matt and Hiline is, right? We're not accounting, but it's like, all right, as we get this reserves, how are we thinking about it? We're getting this grant money in. So a lot of that is, again, we're helping you receive these major gifts and kind of non-cash gifts. And then we're also helping you steward what you've been given until it's ready to spend down. And so we can also do endowments as well. So a lot of it, it's just managing those finances outside of the bank. And we try to make it as easy and accessible as possible for you.
And Kevin, I'm gonna tee you up in a second too, because I think like what Hiline is doing, what Infinite Giving is doing in building infrastructure, credibility, maturity inside organizations, I think it's like the first step. And then I think it becomes easier to start thinking about strategic donor development, because now you've got the muscle internally, you're organized, you're prepared, and you can go do it. So Kevin, maybe just a couple words on building sustainable major gift pipelines and how those two things, as they stack, make it easier.
The only caveat I would make was that also, as you're going through this process, as you're thinking through that infrastructure, before I address your question, you may have people in your network, you may have existing donors that can be helpful in helping you think through this process, helpful in helping you outline your direction. And, that's not everyone, but engagement drives giving. And if this is an opportunity to bring some people closer and help them think through ways that you're going to become stronger, that is a donor cultivation opportunity that is meaningful. The donor feels like they're being helpful. You're getting help. I think you got to manage that carefully, but I don't think it's about necessarily sort of getting everything. Tap into resources, and your donors are resources, and they'll help you. I think, if you're looking at growing your fundraising program, there's basically 4 fundamentals that you have to make sure that you're developing, these prerequisites for success. And the first one is like your perspectives, right? That compelling, inclusive, urgent case for support. What's distinctive about you? What are you doing? Why should this matter to me or my foundation, my company? What kind of money is really needed? Are the outcomes compelling enough to drive a sense of urgency? And by looking at your case and by really fleshing out your case, you can also not just say, we work in children's health. You start looking at adjacent issues, and that's where you can really start building out your prospect list, because you're going to need a sufficient number of prospects relative to your goal. And that comes from a variety of things, right? There's desk research, and there's networking, and there's board development and leadership that can open doors and influence philanthropy, which is sort of that third pillar in a successful fundraising program. And so how you're thinking about evolving your board to be very helpful in terms of bringing in those or identifying community segments of support and bringing them closer to your organization and using them to cultivate those communities becomes critical. And then the last thing, do you have a plan and kind of the discipline to pull it all together? The systems, process, people, culture, how are you developing those assets within your organization so you can be externally focused and sort of strategically building a healthy donor file?
Love that. And everything Kevin's talked about is like, that is being strategic. And is everybody answered back to us, like, when you're suffering from burnout and you're stuck in a doom loop, so hard to be strategic. So like, make the infrastructure built out, make it easier for folks, make it easier on yourself to do business, but make it easier for people to do business with you. It will start to feel easier. The burnout will go away, and then you can focus on being strategic.
Yeah. And also as a resource, I have a book called Funding Your Mission, and you can get it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and I'll see if I can Google it real quick and put a link in there. But that's a great, thank you, Lauren. So there's a link there for the book, but it is a good financial framework, because a lot of it takes a lot of these things that we're talking about. And it's really good because you're like, great, I'm listening. I'm buying in, but I have a board, or I have so-and-so. And so this book is also, the idea is it's just an easy read, but it gives you a really nice framework that you can give to your board members or give to your team, that kind of helps set the table and give you ways of talking about all of these things and getting buy-in from other folks.
I love it. I'm going to have to read the book, Karen.
I know, I should send you one. I'll send you one, Matt. I'm sorry that I haven't already. But yeah, it's actually, it looks like, I think
Someone wrote it.
Somebody
Cool.
it was, and that is a good fit, but it's just a good resource. Awesome.
All right.
Cool.
Good bridge. We got a couple other resources, right? Right,
Yeah.
Katie?
I was just going to say, I want to make sure everybody leaves with some great resources. So we have 3 things here, one from each of our speakers that you can access right after today. I believe Liz is going to drop some links in the chat and also up on the screen. And I think I'm going to have Liz go to the next slide too. We have another incredible resource that it's coming soon. We're going to give you a little bit of a tease, but we've got a full data research report, the Nonprofit Financial Foundation Report. that we built from survey data collected from hundreds of nonprofit founders, executive directors, and finance directors. There's a pre-registration link in the chat that I think Liz will be posting. And if you sign up on there, you'll be the first one to receive it when it's published, which I'm going to say is going to be like in April. We are super excited about it.
All right.
Okay. Now it's the best time for the best part, Q&A.
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 Questions? Rapid fire?
We don't have time for 100 questions. Really crazy. I can start us out with some of the ones that we had from people's registration, but if anybody that's here with us today wants to drop some in the chat, we are happy to answer anything you have live. So let me pick a good one to start out. Matt, I might start with you for one on cash flow. How do we smooth cash flow when grant income is cyclical, but operating costs are continuous?
Well, it's kind of a loaded question because you can't without diversifying, right? But what you can do is you can plan and anticipate it. So again, I think it start like the best way to connect with your board and also to just lay the groundwork for what the year ahead is going to look like. It starts with a budget. It's always easy to figure out how much it's going to cost to run the organization. Make sure that you have a very crisp understanding of where those funding resources are going to come from, how you're going to get them, and when they're going to be here. And that will help you understand the cash need of the organization and where the hotspot weeks and months are going to be. And then a 13-week cash flow. I mean, that's going to help you stay on top of it. But ultimately, long term, it goes back to what Karen was talking about, which is building a 6 to 12 month reserve so that you don't have to worry. I mean, you have to manage it and you should continue to maintain it. But the best thing you can do is work towards that not being like a real material concern for the organization.
Awesome. Okay. How about another one? Oh,
Yeah,
let's do one in the chat. Okay. What about encouraging high capacity donors to give now in smaller amounts rather than saving it for when they pass away? Kevin, I feel like this is a good one for you.
But why encouraging high capacity donors to give now in smaller amounts? I think we want higher capacity donors to be giving now in larger amounts. So, again, this is about, we got to look at your indicators and, what is the data telling you about that donor? How did they come? Do you screen your data for wealth indicators to understand if they have high potential? What are you doing when that gift comes in the door to quickly acknowledge and personally acknowledge to the extent that you can, sort of what the gratitude and value of the gift from the donor, and just on going and build that case. I mean, I think that when you start looking at your higher capacity donors, really putting them on a pathway, if my donor is here today, where do I want them in 18 months? And so if I'm going to get them there in 18 months, where do I have to have them in the next 6 months? And so what are the next 3 steps that I can do to move this donor forward? So you apply those to your top level relationships, and you sort of, the plan evolves as you walk along with it. But sort of thinking strategically about who could you move and how are you going to move them is what needs to drive your program.
Okay. Kevin, somebody also wants you to remind us what step 2 of your 4-pronged program is.
Your compelling case for support, sufficient number of prospects relative to goal, leadership who can open doors and influence philanthropy, and plan that ties it all together.
Okay.
That's a great one. Enough prospects to meet your revenue goal.
It's incredible. Okay, let's see. Here's another good question that got pre-submitted. How do you persuade executive directors to invest in a diversified funding portfolio, especially when it takes money to make money?
Who's that one for? Karen, if you're on there, maybe you're on the
Yeah, I
grant.
think for it to start it off.
Maybe tag team too.
If the question is, I think where I get really passionate is when there's money sitting in the bank losing value. And not everyone realizes the opportunity cost when you look at inflation, because you're like, wait, that's safe. What are we doing? And I'm like, it's not. It's not. You're actively losing value on money sitting in like a checking account because of inflation, right? So if your checking account is giving you 0.01% and inflation's 2.5%, right? Then you're losing value as money sits there. And so then we'll go to a savings account, or then we'll have a CD. And so a lot of what we're talking about when you say like what kind of diversified portfolio, it's always the question of, as an advisor, like we get into the weeds with our people all the time, and we're like, all right, well, what's the money for? Is capital preservation is always king when we're talking to nonprofits, right? We only serve nonprofits. So it's like capital preservation. Are you dipping into it next week? Are you dipping into it at roughly every 3 months? Like we'll even go into like how much operating cash flow should even be in your checking account. Because to your point, it takes money to make money, right? And there's that element of the diversification of your holdings where we'll say, great, let's keep 3 to 6 months of your operating cash flow here. Let's do our money markets like 3.6 roughly right now. So then, all right, we'll have operating cash here. Okay, well, what about your emergency reserve? Well, that's a government-backed fixed income portfolio, right? And we can go through what's right for you, but we work through short-term, midterm, and then maybe long-term, right? Not everyone gets to long-term, but we're building that like cash management before we get into investments. And that's a nuance, but it's one that usually that path kind of needs to be taken. Sometimes people come to us and be like, great, we want an endowment. I'm like, tell me about your reserve fund. And they're like, we don't have one. Like, we're not ready to talk endowments until you have a healthy reserve fund, but we'll work through that path with you to make sure that, again, as a fiduciary, that we're just partnering with you and saying, hey, let's steward this as wisely as we can within the framework that's most comfortable. But there is not a nonprofit that should have funds outside of operating cash flow sitting in their bank.
Okay.
Yes,
You won the
Karen,
mark.
the CEO of Infinite Giving.
Oh yes, I'm an investment advisor for nonprofits and the CEO of Infinite Giving.
I don't know if to say it's very, it's really worthwhile to run a risk analysis on your revenue portfolio. And so that doesn't have to be super sophisticated, but just looking at, what are the sources of revenue? What are the number of donors that I have that are giving 10, 5, 1, more, whatever it is, sort of, and playing out based on segment performance, based on sort of what's happening in that constituency. But what does that look like over 5 years? And is your risk ratio growing? And if it is, you got a case.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're right at time. Thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate it. Such great engagement and an incredible topic. Karen, thank you. And Kevin, thank you as well.
Thank you.
Good to
Karen,
be
Kevin,
here.
thank you so much for coming. And thank you everybody who joined us today.
Thanks.